So here we go, episode 3, part 2 of Foraging for Beginners. We're now into November and I'm going to teach you in this video about some late autumn mushrooms that are growing right now, and I'm also going to throw in some videos that I did earlier on in the year of different families and other species that you can look for at different times of the year. As I said in episode 3 part 1, there was just too much footage to put into one video, and I would have done this a little bit sooner, but unfortunately my laptop broke down and spent 2 weeks in the repair shop. So you're getting the bonus though, that I'm now going to be able to show you some of the later autumn mushrooms in this video. Now, in episode 3 part 1, I told you about the saprotrophic fungus and the parasitic fungus, and I mentioned that in this video I was going to talk more about the mycorrhizal fungus. So that's where we're going to start. Now, the mycorrhizal fungus, I like to think of them as the feeders. They're the mushrooms that live underground, and underground they're kind of like this three-dimensional spider's web called mycelium that's made up of all these little tubes called hyphae. Now, underground, those fungus cannot photosynthesize, they can't produce their own food, they don't hunt. What they have to do to be able to survive is latch onto the root system of a host organism to be able to survive, and then what they do is they feed that host organism. And latest research says that something like 95% of all plants on the planet have some of these mycorrhizal relationships. And nowadays, when you buy a tree from a nursery, you'll find that instead of a big, massive ball of mud, you get a root ball covered in white stuff. That's mycelium, which is going to help that tree grow. So we now are beginning to understand how important these mycorrhizal relationships are. Effectively, though, what the mushroom does is it kind of extends the root system of the tree or the plant it's growing with, and it can break into extra nutrient resources that the tree just can't. They can break down rocks to give minerals to the trees to make them bigger and healthier, and they can reach resources that the tree's roots will never get anywhere near. So they feed the tree or the plant, make it bigger and stronger, and then in return the trees and the plants give the mushrooms back what they need to survive. And this is a fantastic frontier area of science where botanists and mycologists are having to work together to figure out how our forests work. And there's evidence that trees can pass nutrients to each other because both trees could be connected by the mycelium underground. There's even evidence of chemical signals being passed between trees, or electrical signals even have been picked up. Whether that's communication or not, I'm not going to say for sure, because nobody knows for sure yet. Like I said, this is a frontier area of science, but it's certainly something that is helping us understand how our forests truly work. Now, I could go on about this for a long time because I truly love these mycorrhizal fungus, and I know quite a bit about them. But from a forager's point of view, and that's what this video is about, it's good to know which trees have the most edible fungus growing with them. So number 1 for edible mycorrhizal fungus in the UK is the beech tree. I am in a forest of beech trees at the moment, and if you don't know what beech leaves look like, here's one on the floor. I'll find a beech nut somewhere to show you as well, because looking at the floor at this time of year gives you a better idea of what trees you're in amongst than actually looking at the trees. The bark of the beech tree is quite similar to the sycamore or even the ash tree, so just looking at the bark it can be quite tricky to ID what sort of wood you're in. But also look around, there's not much undergrowth in this beech wood, which is another feature that you get from beech trees. As you can see, the leaf litter is carpeting the ground here, which makes it a little bit difficult at this time of year to see some of the mushrooms, and I'll prove that to you in just a second. But basically you don't get loads of brambles and other undergrowth underneath beech trees. So in October and September, before the leaves fall, that makes it a lot easier to see all of the lovely edible mushrooms that grow with beech as well. The second tree for edible fungus in the UK is the oak tree. The oak tree is very closely related to the beech, so they share lots of species as well. The third most edible fungus grow with grass. And then fourth is the birch tree. Spruce trees are pretty good as well, and there's plenty of mushrooms that grow with other different broadleafs and coniferous trees. But my 4 trees that I like to look out for when I'm going foraging are beech and oak and birch and spruce. Preferably all mature and with lots of moss. That's where you find the widest variety of edible fungus. It's good to know what's at the top. It's also good to know what's at the bottom, because if you're in a wood full of ash trees in autumn, you're not likely to find many edible mycorrhizal fungus. Below them, you've got your laurels and rhododendrons, which acidify the soil and make it hard for other things to grow, including most fungus. Below them, you've got the whole maple family. Maples are not very good for fungus. And then firmly at the bottom, with no edible mycorrhizal fungi partners in the UK, is the sycamore tree. So what that means is quite simple. If you're in a wood full of sycamore looking for mushrooms, you're in the wrong place. Go somewhere else. Look for a wood that's full of mature beech and oak and birch, preferably with some other different broadleaf around and some different types of coniferous trees too, with moss. That's where you're likely to find the widest variety of fungus. Now I'm going to start this video with a species that will probably have all of you guys looking for fungus for the next 5 years, because it's one of the most sought after fungus, edible fungus in the world. But it's a very difficult one to find. There are hundreds of them growing behind me. So head over this way, Attila. Can you see them yet? Point the camera straight at the mushrooms, Attila. Let's see. Can the viewers see them? Over here we've got some slightly more proud ones. These ones are a bit more visible. Now I do consider these good, safe mushrooms for beginners. But I know people that have been foraging for 10 years and have never found themselves a spot of the horn of plenty. Craterellus cornucopoides. Here's a lovely, fully mature example. Now, you might have eaten this in restaurants. In restaurants, they give it the French name, the trompe de mort, or the trumpet of death, which is not a particularly appealing sounding name to me. That's the French name. I think they think the French names make them sound more expensive or more tasty, but the trumpet of death, apparently dead bodies underground use this mushroom to trumpet up through. Now, our British name, the horn of plenty, is a much better one if you ask me. That comes from its scientific name, Craterellus cornucopoides. The cornucopia was a horn in Greek mythology, I think, which produced endless amounts of food. And that is quite relevant to this mushroom, because when you find one, the first thing you do is stand stock still, because the chances are there are thousands around and you might well be treading on one already. Now, identification wise, this is a mushroom for beginners. There's only a few black mushrooms. I'm probably going to show you one a bit later in this video. There's the blackening russula, which goes black but is not hollow, so it's not similar to this. I'll show you this one in more detail in a second. There's blackening waxcaps, but they grow in grassland, so you're not going to find them with beech trees like this one here. So this is a pretty unique looking mushroom, making it safe for beginners to identify. Now let's have a close look here. You can see it's a hollow mushroom. This is the first of the Craterellus that I'm going to show you today, and the Craterellus are generally all hollow. If I break off the base of the mushroom, you'll see what I mean. You can pretty much, it's all broken, but there you go. It's like a sheet. wrapped around a tube. It's always darker in the inside and slightly lighter on the outside. You can see it's silvery grey on the outside. Growing with beech trees from late August through to, we're into November now. This is the only mushroom that's hollow that looks like this. So it's perfectly safe for beginners, but good luck finding them, guys. This is the first of quite a few gourmet mushrooms that I'm going to squeeze into this video. If you find these though, it's a good day foraging. Let's see what else we can find. So I just showed you one of the Craterellus, the Craterellus cornucopoides, the horn of plenty, which grows most often with beech trees and oak trees. Now I'm going to show you a different side to the Craterellus. Down here we have the Craterellus tubiformis. As with most Craterellus, it grows by the thousand. This one is most commonly known as the winter chanterelle. Now, all chanterelles have pretty unique gills. Let's see if I can find one that's a bit better. There you go. The gills are what's known as false gills. You can see they're more like veins or wrinkles under the cap, and they go off in all kinds of crazy directions. They're not the true bladed gills that you get on most mushrooms. Now, these ones grow most commonly with spruce, really, but you do find them with oak trees and other trees occasionally. And we've got a special name for them. There's a good fat one. Because the stems are hollow, as you can see there, just like with the horn of plenty, the stems are hollow. And the stems are yellow, and because of that they quite often flatten out, as you can see there. So we call this mushroom the yellow legs. You can see it's folded in the middle and it looks a lot like it's wearing a pair of yellow trousers. You can see some mould on the gills of this one, which means I'm not going to be putting this one in the basket, but you can very clearly see those wrinkles instead of true bladed gills. The winter chanterelle doesn't open up like a trumpet most of the time. You get a solid cap, especially on the young ones like this one here. But the stems will always be hollow. Now, these are a good, safe mushroom for beginners, as long as you are happy identifying those false gills. They can grow in amongst lookalikes, the Leotia lubrica, the jelly baby, where you can't see the gills. And there's a couple of Cortinarius that can have very similar caps, but they'll have rusty, true gills. Whereas these false gills tell you you've got the winter chanterelle. They're a very good edible. They are highly prized in restaurants. I do think that some of the other mushrooms in this video are a little bit tastier, but there's one amazing thing about the winter chanterelle, and if Attila can not trip over all of the wood around, I'll show you what that is. Have a look here. There's probably 100. Look under there. There's probably another 50. Follow me round. Look here. All quite young. We're in November now. These are called the winter chanterelle because they will grow all through winter. I've found them right up to February. Have a look under here. Keep coming, Attila. Look round there. There's another 100 or so. Another load of babies. I'll definitely be coming back here in a week or so. Come around here, Attila, and watch where you tread. More there, more there. Some under there. Now, follow me this way. We'll keep going round. And here are, well, there's a load more under there. Follow me this way, sir. A load more there. And over here, just another 100 or so. Again, I'll show you those full skills. Tube-like stem. And growing by the 1,000. Our winter chanterelle. Remember those gills? And you can pick these safely as a beginner. Let's see what else we can find. Just a little recap now from part 1 of the mushroom foraging for beginners episode that I did. I filmed that one mostly in September, but we're in November now. In September, I showed you this mushroom, but they were babies. Have a look down here, Attila. We've got some mature hedgehog fungus here. And I'm just recapping these for you guys because these are certainly one of the best fungus for beginners, right? There's a bit of slug damage on top of this one, but under the cap, we'll see those lovely spikes, which give it its name, the hedgehog fungus. Now, there might be a bit of slug damage on these, but I can feel by the stems, they're nice and firm. They don't tend to get infested with maggots, the hedgehog fungus. So as long as they're not mouldy, and as long as they're still quite firm, they are still good enough to forage. And they are a super tasty mushroom, and one of the safest. The rule is, if it's white with spikes under the cap in the UK, growing out the ground with a stem, then it's a hedgehog fungus. And these are coming home with me. So I've shown you a few of the real easy mushrooms for beginners. Now in this video, we're going to start talking about the different genus of mushrooms that I think are safe for beginners. Different genus of mushrooms have rules that you can apply to them, which you just can't do to all mushrooms. And down here, we've got a genus of mushrooms that all of you guys will recognize. So let's have a look. It'll look very much like the mushrooms you buy in the shops, because the mushrooms that you buy in the shops are part of this genus. Your little button mushrooms, closed cup mushrooms, slightly more mature mushrooms, and portobellos are all cultivated versions of one wild type of Agaricus called the Agaricus bisporus. This is not that mushroom. This is another Agaricus mushroom. There's at least 40 different types of Agaricus mushroom in the UK, and most of them are edible. There's a couple that will make you sick, and they make some people particularly sick for 48 hours or so. So obviously you don't want to eat those. But with this genus of mushrooms, there are 2 easy ways to rule out the toxic members. The toxic member of this genus that's white and looks like this, the yellow stainer, Agaricus xanthodermus, causes the most poisonings in Britain of any mushroom every year, because of people thinking they've found a nice field mushroom like this one here, whereas the yellow stainer is superficially identical to these. It has 2 key identifiers, and that's what you need to look out for with the Agaricus genus. And those 2 key identifiers, one of them's really simple, it's in the name, the yellow stainer. If this was a yellow stainer, where I damage it there, it would stain yellow. This one's not really staining at all. The other key thing with this genus, and it's a way of identifying different members of the genus as well, is what does it smell like. It's important to use your nose when you're foraging for plants and mushrooms, and particularly with this genus of mushrooms. So what I'll get from this one, the field mushroom, Agaricus campestris, is exactly the same smell as the mushrooms that you would buy in the shops, because it's a very close relative of the Agaricus bisporus. The other smells that you get in this genus are aniseed, and that'll apply to some mushrooms I'll show you in a minute, or almond. I don't know if I'll find any of the almond smelling ones for you for this video, but those two smells, along with the smell of mushrooms, are edible smells. They smell nice. They smell like things that you want to eat. The ones that are poisonous or toxic in this family, the yellow stainer and the inky mushroom, and potentially a couple of others in the UK, not only do they stain chrome bright yellow, they also smell horrible. They smell of phenol or Indian ink, if you like, and I think it's the phenolic content of those mushrooms that makes you sick when you eat them. So if you can recognize that smell, then you can rule out the toxic ones of this genus. But a nice simple way to pick safely from this genus is to rule out any that stain yellow and any that don't smell like you would like to eat them. There's another little way with the toxic members of this genus. When you put them in a frying pan, that horrible smell is amplified. Also, if you pour boiling water over a yellow stainer, it goes bright yellow, or if you put it in the microwave, it goes bright yellow as well. But you don't want to have to pick the mushrooms and take them home to figure that out. Just use your nose in the field. Now, the genus, as I said, is one you'll recognise, but I'll run through the reasons now that you recognise it. First of all, it has a stout white stem on this particular member of the genus. There are some different coloured caps, but they all have a stout white stem. They all have a skirt on the stem, although on this one it's quite ephemeral, that word I love. You should still be able to make out the remnants of a skirt on the stem of every Agaricus. Now, the gills, when they're young, let's open up this closed cup one, will be pinkish. And they are on all the Agaricus. But then, as they mature, as you can see, they will go slightly darker pinky brown through to particularly dark and almost black sometimes on the more mature ones. Now, in this genus, there are, as I said, well over 30 good edibles. Some of them are not white though. The non-white members of this genus are a little bit more tricky to ID as far as I'm concerned to species. But all you need to know to pick from this genus safely is dark gills or pink to dark gills, stout white stem, skirt on the stem, and smell them and make sure they don't stain yellow. And that opens up at least 30 different mushrooms that you can now pick safely in the UK. And this one, the field mushroom, Agaricus campestris, when it comes up around here in Herefordshire, it comes up in abundance. There are kilos of it in this tiny little paddock that I'm in at the moment. So that's your first introduction to the Agaricus genus. Let's have a look at a few more. So a bit of a deeper dive on the Agaricus. We've got some more down here, but as you can see, I'm in woodland now. The field mushroom doesn't grow in woodland, as the name suggests, but this one does. We've got some babies here and some slightly more mature ones over here. Showing those, oh, it's nice and young, so the gills are just still pink. Now, if I damage this, I expect that you will see some mild yellow staining. There you go. But using the second test, my nose, and having a smell of these, I get the most delightful smell of aniseed. These are quite small. They will get to 2 or 3 times as big as this at least, but this is the wood mushroom, Agaricus sylvaticus, and this is a really, really tasty member of the Agaricus group, the Agaricus genus. So I'm happy to find these today. One thing about these ones though, the wood mushroom, they don't have a very long shelf life. If you pick these, you kind of want to cook them on exactly the same day. The field mushrooms will last a couple of days in your fridge and still be nice and fresh. But these, for some reason or other, wilt quite quickly. Just to reiterate again though, stout white stem, skirt on the stem. They don't have white gills. They're pink to start off with, and they'll go through to very dark. And this one does stain a little bit yellow. That's why you always do the 2 tests. See what colour they stain and have a smell. Now, one last thing whilst I'm here. Around this group of mushrooms, I found another mushroom looking reasonably similar. 2 different types of mushroom can be growing within inches of each other. This is not a wood mushroom. It's still got the stout white stem. Slightly pinkish gills, but no skirt on the stem whatsoever. And I'm going to have a smell of this one. No aniseed smell either. This one smells of radish. Now, in the mushroom world, for a forager, the smell of radish is a bad smell. This is one of the hebelomas, or the poison pie family. So just be aware, within inches of your lovely tasty mushrooms, there can be others that are going to make you sick. No skirt on the stem, and a very different smell. Just remember that little tip though. If your mushroom smells of radish, it's more than likely not edible, and it could be quite poisonous. So I've shown you some white Agaricus mushrooms, but as I said earlier, there are some different coloured species of Agaricus, and we've got one of those down here. Now this side of the Agaricus family is much more difficult to identify to species. This is quite a small one. They would even, I'm sure this particular one, get a little bit bigger, but you can see it's not white on the cap. All of the other features that I told you about for the field mushroom will stay true with this though. It has a stout white stem. It has a skirt on the stem. This skirt is much easier to see than on those field mushrooms because it's stayed there while some of the brownish spores have dropped onto it, and it's discoloured brown, whereas it would be white when it was very young. The gills start off just off white to pink, and they'll go through to pinky brown, and just like with the field mushrooms, when this mushroom was fully mature and opened out flat, it would have almost black gills. Now this is an Agaricus, slightly more tricky to ID than the field mushroom, but from an edibility point of view, from a foraging point of view, the same rules apply. What colour does the mushroom stain, particularly at the base of the stem where damaged? You can see it's blushing ever so slightly pink. And what does it smell like? So from this one, I'm getting quite a mushroomy smell. Not a strong smell of aniseed, but mushroomy is good. As I said before, it does not smell of phenol. Now, nice and simply though, if an Agaricus blushes pink, then full stop. In the UK, it is edible. So I have an edible mushroom here that I, right now, without my books, cannot take to species level, but I know, full stop, this is edible and tasty. So it's coming home with me. So now I'm going to finish off the Agaricus section of this video. And down here I've got 3 different types, and I'll drop in some photos of another important one to know about. I'll start off with this white one here. This is a whitish mushroom, but because I've been handling it, you can see it's gone a bit yellow. And I'll damage the cap a little bit, and you'll see a bit of mild and slow yellow staining. Bit of a danger sign, but this has 2 other key characteristics that let me know it's not the toxic yellow stainer. First of all, those bumps around the annulus or partial veil, or what will become the skirt of the mushroom, that's called a cogwheel, and the yellow stainer does not have that. And secondly, the smell. From this one I am getting a wonderful strong smell of aniseed, and that tells me that this is most likely the horse mushroom, Agaricus arvensis, and this little baby will get much bigger. Horse mushrooms can get to this size, and then there's one that can get even bigger, the Agaricus crocodilinus, I think is its current scientific name, the macro mushroom, that can get to dinner plate size. So these are bigger Agaricus than the field mushroom that I showed you at the beginning, and they are extremely tasty. There's another one down here though, have a look at this. Tawny coloured cap, which will open up and get scaly, like you see there. That is one of the most sought after of the Agaricus mushrooms. It's called the Prince. It has a few key features. First of all, there you see probably the lightest gills that you will ever see on an Agaricus mushroom. And secondly, this has a distinctive smell. It's not quite aniseed, it's more almond. So almond stroke aniseed is the smell that you get from the Prince. This and this are both wonderful edible mushrooms. Now I'm going to show you one of the toxic ones. Here you can see a mushroom called the inky mushroom, Agaricus moelleri. It's a dark one, but you can see it's a different colour to the tawny cap of our Prince. And what you'll see on this one when I damage it, in fact look just where it's been handled there, is a much more dramatic yellow staining. Normally even more dramatic when you damage the base of the stem. See it yellowing quite quickly there, and everywhere it's been handled. Now this mushroom, when I smell this, I get the smell of phenol, or people say Indian ink, and that rules this out as an edible mushroom. This one and the yellow stainer, which is the white toxic Agaricus, are the 2 that you really want to avoid. The yellow staining and the smell are your key identifying features for these 2. I'll drop in some photos of the yellow stainer now. It looks a lot like our horse mushroom that I was just talking about. It has a longer stem and often a sort of almost cube-like cap as well. And as you can see in that photo, the yellow staining on it is quite dramatic. So, the Agaricus genus. Stout white stem on almost all of them. Pink to brown gills on almost all of them. And the ones that you want to eat smell edible. The ones you don't want to eat stain yellow and smell of chemicals. They won't kill you, these mushrooms, but they will certainly leave you on the toilet for quite a long time. So in part one of this video, I introduced you to the milkcap group of fungus. The milkcaps are easily identified by the fact that they lactate. They are also quite brittle in texture, or most of them are. And they are very closely related to this group of fungus that I'm going to show you right now. So let's have a look down here, Attila. We've not got any brilliant specimens. This one's in very good condition, so I'll use that one in just a second to show you the key identifying features of the Russula genus of mushrooms. These are commonly known as the Brittlegills. Now, at the beginning of this video, I showed you the horn of plenty, and I said that there's some other black mushrooms, but none of them could be mistaken for the horn of plenty, as long as you make sure you've got a nice hollow mushroom. I've got one of the black mushrooms I mentioned right here. This is the blackening Russula, a very old specimen. They start off white and they go black as they get old. As you can see, this looks nothing like that horn of plenty, but it's probably the type species for showing off the reason that they get called the Brittlegills. So if I do this, you'll see those gills are incredibly brittle. Even though this is wet and mouldy and old, they flake all over the place. There's a load more, so tough and flaky. Now that's a very old blackening Russula nigricans. There's a few others here. Now, I cannot, and nobody else can, identify all of the Russula to species in the field. It is utterly impossible. You've got about 12 yellow ones, about 12 red ones, about 12 purple ones. There's probably over 200 different species of Russula that grow in the UK alone. Luckily enough, none of the ones that grow in the UK are highly toxic. There is one that grows in the Far East, which is known to be much more toxic than any that we get in the UK. But the worst any Russula will do to you from the UK variety of species that we've got is make you sick. And that's only if you eat a reasonable amount of them, which, even though you can't identify them to species in the field, makes them a genus of interest to the forager. But we're kind of going a little bit beyond beginner foraging here, and for reasons you're about to find out. Now, down here, we've got a white one, an off-white one, a greeny brown one, a red one, and a couple of purple ones. They all share a few characteristics, and you quite often find them like this because squirrels absolutely love them. That's what's happened to this one here. A squirrel's munched all its gills. Squirrels also hide them away up in the boughs of trees to eat them later. Here's a stem of one of the Brittlegills, and I'll show you what happens when you snap the stem of a Brittlegill. The whole mushroom is brittle and the stem snaps like a piece of chalk, which makes them quite a unique genus of mushrooms to look out for. Then the caps, when they're not munched by squirrels, are normally colourful and reasonably well presented. The blackening Russula is one of the biggest ones in the group. This one would open out into a flat mushroom of about that size. Now I'll just show you again on this one. The stem snaps like a piece of chalk. And the gills, let's have a look and see if we've got a different example. The gills of all of them, bar one, flake pretty much like almonds. Now, with that white stem and the different colours on the cap, you could mistake these for the amanitas. So be well aware of that before you do the test that I'm about to show you for edibility. The test you can only do when you are 100% sure that you have a Brittlegill is to have a nibble. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to drop in some photos of some much better looking specimens. So right now, what you can see in front of you is the beechwood sickener, Russula nobilis, a beautiful red Russula. Now, what you can see is a beautiful bright yellow one. That one is the yellow swamp Russula. I think its scientific name is Russula clariflava or clariflova. Now I'm going to show you a green one with a slightly cracked cap. Funnily enough, called the green cracked Russula. And finally, I'm going to show you the most famous one, the charcoal burner. This one has a very variable cap colouring. It is the only member of the whole group that doesn't have brittle gills. There's always one. But that makes it the easiest to identify, and it's probably the best edible in the field. Now, back to the mushrooms I have at hand. This one with the red colouring we found under a beech tree. So I'm going to have a nibble of this. And yes, as expected, I'm getting a burning sensation on the tip of my tongue, much like I've just nibbled a bit of chili. So this is probably an old version of that Russula nobilis that I showed you in the photos a second ago, the beechwood sickener. And this is one that if you were to eat a whole one, it would make you sick. I don't have any problem swallowing that tiny little nibble that I had just now though. This one here, this purpley one, let's have a little check of the gills. When they're young, the gills don't tend to flake quite so easily. They seem reasonably flaky though. I'm going to have a nibble of this one. And from this one, I'm not getting any burning whatsoever. I'm getting a lovely flavour of mushroom. So this one is edible. The ones that burn your tongue are the ones that will make you sick. This one here, the white one, I'm a bit dubious about. Let's try this. Oh. So I'm not really getting a burning from this one. It's the only one I'm taking out my mouth because it is not a tasty mushroom. That mushroom tasted quite acrid and horrible. The beechwood sickener burnt my tongue. This one here, which could be a young charcoal burner, tasted lovely and didn't burn my tongue at all. So the nibble test serves two purposes with this genus of mushrooms. First of all, does it burn your tongue? If so, don't eat it. And second of all, what does it taste like? If it tastes horrible, and some of them do, then leave them behind. I can understand that this is a level above beginner foraging though. If you've got to have a nibble of something to figure out whether it's toxic or edible, then that might be something that puts a lot of you off. But I strongly urge all of you to try to get familiar with this group of mushrooms, because when there are no horn of plenty, when there are no winter chanterelles, no porcinis, there are always Russula around, and they are brightly coloured and easy to identify after a little while. So once you're familiar with everything else in these two videos that I've created for you, this is the next group of mushrooms to go on to. Anyway, let's take the tasty ones home, Attila, leave the red one and the white one, and see what else we can find for the video. Okay, so now I am going to introduce you to what I consider to be the most colourful and beautiful genus or family or group of mushrooms that we have growing in the UK. I introduced you to the russula earlier in this video. They're pretty colourful, but nothing are quite like these. Follow me over here. You've got a yellow one there. A beautiful red one there that would probably have bright yellow gills. There are pink ones. There are scarlet ones. There are green ones. There are white ones. And there are orange waxcap mushrooms. The waxcap group are typified by a waxy texture and the fact that most of them grow in unimproved grassland. In fact, they're a way of grading the grassland that you're in. Watch my mushroom foraging in winter or winter mushroom foraging video for much more information about that. Now, the waxcap group are mostly all edible, but because our unimproved grassland habitats in Britain are shrinking, quite a few of them are becoming rare. Have a look at this photo of the beautiful ballerina, formerly I think the pink meadow waxcap. That one is one that you certainly don't want to pick. And I generally don't pick the yellow ones. That's probably the golden waxcap, but there's a few different yellow ones and they're hard to identify in the field. This one down here, probably the crimson waxcap. Might be the splendidissimo. Hygrocybe is the main part of this genus. And there are a lot of them. They are difficult to identify to species, and many of those species are becoming rare. But there are two that are still extremely common, and one out of the whole group that I consider safe for beginner foragers. Now, the two that are common are these two here. The snowy waxcap, which is obviously going to be white, and the meadow waxcap. I'm going to start with the snowy waxcap. Most waxcaps have decurrent gills. That means the gills run down the stem. And as I said, quite a waxy texture. Now this one, the snowy, is a good edible, but white mushrooms are a danger sign for beginner foragers. And this one I consider to be too close a lookalike for some of the clitocybes, which are potentially deadly poisonous. So wait until you're really familiar with your waxcaps and your snowies before you start picking these. It does have a very waxy feel to the cap, and the cap will very rarely become funnel shaped like those clitocybes, but still don't take any risks. There is, though, as I said, one in the group that I consider to be safe for beginners and a great one to know about, because this is a group of mushrooms that come up in late autumn and go right the way through winter. This one here is the meadow waxcap. This is a beautiful youngster here. The meadow waxcap, which is now Kuphophilus pratensis, has this lovely orange cap. And those slightly lighter orange and decurrent gills on an even slightly lighter off-white to orange-ish sort of stem. You can see the stem on this one is quite large. And that's because this mushroom would have opened up to about this size. I have seen these 10 times as big as this though. Again, if you watch my winter mushroom foraging video from a few years ago, the one at the end of that video is the biggest one I've ever seen, and it is impressive. Although, not all of them mature at that size. Here's a fully mature one. Still got that orange cap. It's lighter orange gills. And the stem's a bit wet, so it's looking a bit more orange than normal, with a waxy texture. You can see cracking a bit like wax just around where my finger is there. Should have cleaned my nails before this video. This is a really lovely edible, and it's a mushroom that you can pick through winter, and it's a mushroom that you quite often find in abundance. So go for the meadow waxcap, leave all the other colours behind, and then when you get a bit more familiar with the group, start going for the snowies as well. The waxcaps, a beautiful group of mushrooms to know about. So now we're going to talk about the bracket fungus that we go after as foragers, that I consider safe for beginners. And we've got both of them growing out of this fallen oak tree right here. There's also 2 more polypores that grow around the base of trees because they're parasitic on the roots of the tree. I'll go into those in this video as well. This one here is a bracket. It's a mushroom that grows like a shelf, growing out the side of the tree. And this one, the beefsteak fungus, is specific to oak trees and chestnut trees. Now, this one's been well munched, but I'll drop in a photo now of one looking nice and healthy for you. That's a good looking beefsteak fungus there. This one's been well munched, but it's going to be able to show me, or let me show you, the key identifying features of it. First of all, the 2 polypores, or the 2 brackets that I consider safe, are both soft. And this one, as you can see, is malleable. There are plenty of bracket fungus which aren't toxic, but they are as hard as the wood that they are growing out of. This one is nice and soft. Now, it looks a bit like a beefsteak from the top. It also gets called the ox tongue fungus because it has a sort of texture like a cow's tongue on the top of the fungus when it's young. Now I'm going to cut a chunk off of this here and show you. Where it matures, this mushroom actually exudes, I cut a bit more there, a red liquid. Now it's not quite playing ball, but you get the idea. A red liquid, and it looks like a nice marbled bit of Wagyu beef. There's some red liquid coming out there. So it bleeds, and it's soft, and it's red, and it looks a bit like an ox tongue. And there are simply no lookalikes for this mushroom to worry about. There's one toxic bracket, or highly toxic bracket in the UK. It's called the cinnamon bracket, the Hapilopilus. I'll drop in a photo of that one now too, just so you know what that one looks like. Generally grows out of birch trees, a few other species. It's much tougher than this, and it does not bleed. Beefsteak fungus, unfortunately, does not taste like beef. It's quite an acidic mushroom, so it's one that you can actually just cut little slices off of and eat. A bit like beefsteak carpaccio. It's a strange flavoured mushroom. It does go quite nicely in creamy pasta sauces though, where you've got something to combat the acidity of the mushroom. Now, growing out of this very same tree, we've got the remnants of the other, this is not good looking, the other edible bracket fungus. This is old chicken of the woods. And growing out of this tree, we did a video of this earlier on in the year. I'm going to drop in some photos now of chicken of the woods when it is young and fresh. As you can see, it's bright yellow, and again, it's soft and malleable. That fungus, for me, as a vegetarian, is just about the best substitute for chicken that you can get when you get it young. When it's older, it becomes quite tough and quite acrid in flavour. but when young and bulbous, like the photo that you see there, it is a fantastic chicken substitute. It has the texture and the flavour of chicken. Now that mushroom, unlike the beefsteak fungus, does make some people a little bit ill. So the first time you eat chicken of the woods, only eat a small portion, and don't feed a whole dinner party a dinner of chicken of the woods, because somebody at the dinner party might end up being a little bit ill. Chicken of the woods though, no poisonous lookalikes. And beefsteak fungus, no poisonous lookalikes. Two very safe fungus for beginners. Now I'm going to show you those root parasites that are in the polypore group, but they're not really brackets like these two. So I've just shown you those two bracket polypores that I consider to be safe for beginner foragers. Now I'm going to show you one of those root parasitic polypores that I mentioned, and there is an absolute ton of it growing around this old beech stump. Look at that. And then round here even more. This is an enormous mushroom, which gives it one of its common names, the giant polypore. Its other common name is the blackening polypore, because everywhere it gets damaged or old, it will go black. Its scientific name is Mycorrhizal giganteus as well, again referring to the size. Now, at this stage, it's a bit too tough and slightly acrid to eat, but you can see that almost chicken-like texture. Again, a bit like our chicken of the woods. When this is young, I consider this to be a really good edible. So I'm going to drop in some photos of this when it's young right now for you to look at. Look at those bulbous structures. At that stage, this mushroom is much more tender and much more tasty. So that's when I like to harvest it for food. Now, it isn't actually a mushroom that I like to see though. When I first moved to this area, this beech tree was standing. It was a magnificent big beech tree, and for reasons that I gave you at the beginning of this video, I love a beech tree. Unfortunately, one of the things that led to this beech tree coming down would have been this Mycorrhizal giganteus. It's not good for the trees that it grows on, although it is a nice, safe edible for beginners with no real lookalikes in the UK, certainly not at this size. But when young, like the photos I showed you earlier, the only thing you could really mistake it for would be a chicken of the woods. And that is not a bad mistake to make. Now, this is another one of those mushrooms that can potentially make some people a tiny bit ill. So the first time you eat your young Mycorrhizal giganteus, make sure you only eat a small bit and wait 24 hours just to see if it gives you a bit of a dicky tummy, just like with your chicken of the woods. But if you're one of the lucky ones who can eat this safely, it is an abundant food source at this time of year. So we start to see the younger versions come out maybe in the middle of August if it's wet and not too hot, but any time from then to the middle of September, and then it matures like this around the beginning of October. So Mycorrhizal giganteus, the giant polypore or the blackening polypore, certainly a safe one to identify, but not one I particularly like to see. Now I'm going to drop in photos of the other root parasitic polypore that we go after as foragers. What you can see there is hen of the woods. I haven't, unfortunately, whilst filming these shorts, been able to find a fresh hen of the woods this year. But hen of the woods is one of the best edible fungus around. What you've got there is Grifola frondosa, and there's a younger version. It's also well known as maitake mushroom, so you might well have bought this from the shops. It's a wonderfully meaty textured, easy to identify mushroom that is almost exclusive to the base of oak trees. In fact, I've never found it with anything else apart from oak. Hen of the Woods really is one of my favourite edibles and very safe to identify. So that's your 4 safe for beginner polypores. Let's move on to a different group. Right, so this is a foraging for beginners video, and it would be a bit remiss of me to make you think that all of the mushrooms that you find when you're out foraging are edible. The vast majority of fungus that you find when you are out are either poisonous or inedible. So down here we've got probably the most commonly found one of those toxic mushrooms. This beautiful clump here, there's some lovely babies there, are one of the most commonly seen fungus in the UK because they're big and they're a nice bright sulphury yellow colour. Here's one I've picked to show you. This cap will get twice this size and flatten out, and under the cap we have this lovely sort of olivaceous green tinge to the gills. This is a sulphur tuft. It's sulphury yellow and it grows in tufts, Hypholoma fasciculare, and you will see a lot of these, and if you were to eat one it would make you particularly sick. So there you go. And over here in this area we've found probably 20 different species of fungus, and none of them, absolutely none of them, have been edible. But these ones over here are going to allow me to introduce you to a whole big group of mushrooms that you do not want to go foraging for. So down here we've got some young ones. This is a more mature one. If I pick, let's have a look at this one over here. Yes, it's a good example. What you can see attaching the cap to the stem there is a sort of cobweb effect, which tells me that this is one of probably the most complicated genus of macroscopic or big mushrooms that we get in the UK. This is a Cortinarius, or a webcap, so named because of that cobweb effect. Now, that's an easy way to identify the genus when they're young, but have a look at this more mature one. Absolutely no sign of that webbing, and there are hundreds of this particular genus of mushroom in the UK. When they get mature, it's very hard to tell that you've got a webcap. This particular one, I'm pretty sure it's one of the stocking webcaps, because unusually it gets left with a sort of stocking that you can roll down around the edge of the stem. So this is possibly Cortinarius torvus, or the purple stocking webcap, maybe Cortinarius muscifloides or something like that. It's a very complicated group of mushrooms, and we do not advise eating any of them. So these are mushrooms I will be leaving behind today. So I've shown you those sulphur tufts, which are a reasonably toxic mushroom. They cause a lot more than just your little bits of gastric upset. They can cause convulsions and even worse in some people. Now I'm going to show you something truly deadly, and I'm going to use this mushroom down here to show you how to stay away from a whole genus of mushrooms that aren't really for beginners. So let's have a look down here. This is a lovely cluster of the world famous death cap, Amanita phalloides. Contains a number of toxins, the worst probably being one called amanitin A. And this is a lovely specimen we've got here, Attila. It isn't, or it probably isn't, the most poisonous mushroom that we have in the UK. Now, I'm just digging around the mushroom a little bit, because one of the things you need to do if you don't know what a mushroom is get right to the base of the stem. And on this one, the feature I'm looking for is very low down. So what you do, if you can't get to the base visually, is you have to dig around a little bit and then stick your knife in about an inch away from the mushroom and try your best to lever it out without damaging it. Oh, and there we go. At the very base, buried about as deep as I've ever seen, an inch underground there, we have the remnants of the egg sac that this mushroom grew from. That egg sac would have covered the whole mushroom. It's what's called a universal veil, and on many of the amanitas you get the remnants of that egg sac left on the cap. None on here, although these dirty bits could be where some mud stuck to it. You'll probably all know that very famous mushroom, the Amanita muscaria. The white speckles on the top of that one, the fly agaric, the red one with white spots, the white speckles are the remnants of that universal veil, because that is a mushroom in this genus. Now, the other features of the genus are that they have white gills, and the poisonous ones in the genus all have this, what's called a partial veil, which covers up the gills until the cap opens, and then this partial veil will be left on the stem as a skirt or annulus, which you can see there. There is a whole section of the amanitas called the grisettes. They're all edible, but they don't have that skirt. So look out for bulbous bases on your mushrooms, the remnants of the egg sac, and there's a good bit of it there, around the base, white gills with a skirt. Giving my cameraman Attila a bit of a hard time here, and speckles on the cap. Now this one is greenish. You can see this version of it down here is whitish. There is an entirely white version of this, the death cap, Amanita phalloides, and there's also another fantastically named mushroom in this genus called the destroying angel, Amanita verosa. That one is equally as poisonous as this one. The poison from this mushroom will not kill you quickly. It takes a few days to basically almost digest your liver. So it's a mushroom that if you were to eat, they say more than a 50p piece worth of it, although I don't know if there's any scientific basis of that. But if you ate a chunk of the mushroom, then it would be a long, slow, painful death. But you do have to eat it. I'll just dispel another little myth here. I will happily touch this mushroom and lick my finger. There are no fungus in the UK that are dangerous to touch. So if you see some death caps around, leave them behind. Don't start kicking them around or removing them or destroying them. They're doing a good job. They're mycorrhizal mainly with oak trees, so they do a good job for the trees that they grow with. Simple rule, just don't eat anything that looks like this. So So now I'm going to show you a very safe mushroom that goes on through late autumn into winter. In fact, traditionally I go out on Christmas Day to escape the chaos at home and pick these mushrooms, and the latest I've found them is actually through into March. So come on down here and let's have a closer look. We've got them in almost all stages of growth. So here are some younger ones, and here are some mature ones, and there's probably about 100 of them growing around me right now. Now from the cap, they're not easy to distinguish from other mushrooms like the Clitocybe nebularis, the clouded agaric, but if I get these young ones and I'll cut one of these and show you the underside. Have a look at that beautiful colouring there. Now, oh, and a little mosquito, we'll get rid of him. Now, these are mushrooms that make it into restaurants. In restaurants, again, they'd give these the French name, the pied bleu, or the bluefoot. There's also more colloquial names around the UK of these, the blue legs. But what we know these as is the wood blewit. Now, with that lovely lilac purpley colouring on the gills and the stem, these are a mushroom that I consider safe for beginner foragers. They're a mushroom with an unusual smell as well, so yeah, get a nice sort of almost perfumey smell to the blewits. They are a bit of an acquired taste to some people though. They don't taste like most of the mushrooms that you'll pick. They've got a taste a bit akin to that perfumey smell. So I've got to be honest with you, they are not one of my favourites. But I know people who say that these are their favourite mushrooms to eat, full stop. We've all got different taste buds, people. We are all unique human beings. And these, for me, they're not at the top of my list, but they might well be at the top of yours. Now, we're into November, and this one is only maybe 3 or 4 days old. It would have grown for another week or so before becoming a fully flattened out cap like this one here. Let's have a look and see if this one, yeah, still with those lovely lilac-y purple gills and stem. Bit of a twisted stem on that one. You don't normally see that with these. But yes, the cap has fully flattened out. And I can tell by the fact that there's no holes in the base of it that there are no maggots in this mushroom. So this is still a perfectly edible wood blewit. Lepista nuda, or potentially Clitocybe nuda, depending on which books you read, I consider this to be one of the safest mushrooms around because of the time of year it grows and this colouring. If there is a safe colour in the mushroom world, it's purple. And there you go. Lovely. One thing I forgot to mention about these is that they must be well cooked. Certainly more than your normal mushroom. If not, they can make you a little bit sick. And some people actually have a reaction to these mushrooms as well. So I'd suggest the first time that you eat these mushrooms, you only eat a small portion. Make sure you don't get any gastric upset. And then if you don't, you can go back and have a full portion afterwards. That's it. Apart from this shot, I have finally finished the marathon that was editing Foraging for Beginners episode 3 part 2. It's been a bit of a marathon watch for you guys as well if you've got this far. I know they were both long episodes, but believe me, I still didn't get in all of the fungus that I consider to be safe for beginners. Notably missing from this last video are the scarlet elf cup, which will be coming out soon, and the field blewit, which is very safe for beginners, which is around right now. I just couldn't find any for the video, and that means that maybe next year I'll do episode 3 part 3. I'm also going to do episodes 4 and 5 about trees and flower meadows when I can next year, so I hope you're looking forward to those. Just remember what I said at the beginning of episode 3 part 1 though. Never eat anything from the wild unless you know exactly what it is. That applies to plants and obviously to mushrooms. And if you want to be 100% sure of what you've got, it's always good to cross-reference your mushroom against 2 or 3 different photos in 2 or 3 different books or websites. Obviously, I have to recommend our own mushroom foraging pocket guide. It has got nothing so far but good reviews, so it wasn't just me and my mum that wrote them all as well, so other people seem to like this book, and it has been rated as the best mushroom guide for beginners. The best way though for you guys to get confident in picking things for yourself is to go out on a course or go out with somebody who knows what they're doing. There's nothing like the hands-on experience of being able to touch a mushroom, see where it grows, see how big it is, smell it, maybe taste it. Those are the things that you get from a hands-on experience that you just can't get from this video or from books. That way you get confidence to pick things for yourself. So one last little bit of exciting news though. We've just taken delivery of the advanced copy of our new book. We've been working on this for about 3 years. This is the Wild Food UK Foragers Cookbook. Unfortunately, it's not going to arrive before Christmas. We're taking delivery of the main batch sometime in January, but we are putting this up for pre-order on the website now. So if you want to buy our mushroom guide or pre-order this one, go to foraging.co.uk. And if you want to book a course for next year, go to wildfooduk.com. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Give it a like, subscribe if you want to, and you can always donate something to us on Patreon if you like the things that we do. Anyway, I'll see you again soon, and in the meantime, keep foraging.